Welcome, colleagues, to this clinical masterclass focusing on Larix decidua, the Larch remedy. We have titled this lecture The Architecture of Confidence because confidence is not vague, ethereal emotion. It's an internal psychological structure. In the batch remedy classification system, Larch is assigned a highly specialized role within Group 6, which covers the emotional terrain of despondency and despair, while other remedies in this group addresses response to external crisis or self-reproach. Large targets a very specific foundational flaw, the chronic deficit of self-confidence and achievement. As clinicians, we often observe individuals whose external reality is completely disconnected from their inner convictions. Our core thematic focus today will examine how expected failure, deep-seated self-doubt, a visceral feeling of inferiority, and subsequent chronic underachievement paralyze human expression. Our ultimate goal through this study is to understand how this remedy facilitates a profound transition toward, toward courageous participation in life. Let us begin section 1 by mapping out that I call the energetic architecture of the Larch state. To understand this archetype, we must look at it as a predictable path of behavioral degradation. We start with raw human potential, the innate capacity, talent, and intelligence that every individual brings to the table. However, when the large matrix intervenes, an invasive wedge of self-doubt is driven between that potential and its execution. This doubt immediately breeds behavioral avoidance. The individual looks at an opportunity and says, I cannot. Avoidance naturally results in missed opportunities, which means the person never gathers the experiential feedback necessary to correct their internal narrative. This cycle is self-reinforcing. In this section, we will deconstruct the confidence matrix, draw a definitive line between objective ability and subjective belief, and analyze the profound hidden somatic and psychological costs of non-participation. When diagnosing the core large state, you must train yourself to see an invisible psychological barrier. Imagine a highly capable individual standing behind a thick wall of glass. They can look through the glass and clearly see opportunities, careers, relationships, and creative achievements waiting on the other side. But they perceive that glass as completely impassable. The baseline reality of this slide is clear. Ability exists. This is a non-negotiable diagnostic marker. The patient is not incompetent. They are paralyzed. Confidence is entirely absent, meaning success is viewed as a statistical improbability for them, though they readily believe others can achieve it. They assume failure as a historical fact before an action has ever been initiated. Consequently, life options are systematically avoided rather than attempted, leaving the individual standard in a safe but profoundly restrictive comfort zone. Let's trace the dynamic behavioral flowchart of expected failure. This is not a static state of mind, it's a degenerative process. The loop begins with foundational self-doubt. This doubt generates an immediate mental projection, anticipated failure. When a person anticipates failure with absolute certainty, their nervous system treats the upcoming event as a threat, triggering a defensive strategy of avoidance. By avoiding the situation, whether it's an exam, a job, interview, or a social interaction, the individual achieves immediate short-term relief from anxiety. However, the long-term clinical cost is devastating. Lost experience. Without experience, there is no learning, no skill refinement, and no positive reinforcement. This lack of data reinforces the pre existing feeling of inferiority, causing confidence to decline even further. As a practitioner, you must disrupt this loop because every time a patient avoids an opportunity, the large state becomes more deeply entrenched. I refer to this condition as the silent tragedy because it leaves no visible scars, loud cries, crisis, or explosive emotional outbursts. It's a quiet, eroding loss. If we look at two parallel life paths, we see the true cost. On one path, an individual attempts a task, faces challenges, but ultimately achieves success or grows from the attempt. On the parallel path, the large path, the journey is never even attempted. The greatest loss in human development is unattempted success. The talent remains entirely hidden, locked away in the patient's mind. Opportunities pass by unused, and over time, the boundaries of the individual's life contract. Life becomes significantly smaller than their genetic and intellectual potential. Self limitation completely replaces active growth, and the individual settles into a quiet resignation, watching others live the life they were fully capable of leading. What does the clinical resolution of this state look like? The transformation of Larch is beautiful in its steady, unshakable stability. Think of a closed, tightly wrapped bud finally opening and growing into a strong, upright tree. When the large remedy is introduced, it doesn't create a false sense of bravado or overcompensated arrogance. Instead, it births a healthy, grounded self confidence. The primary clinical indicator of improvement is the renewed courage to participate. The patient stops saying, I can't, and begins saying, I will try. They re enter the school of life, learning through raw experience and discovering that mistakes are not proofs of inferiority but simply data points in development. They experience complete freedom from the weight of assumed inferiority, leading to the gradual realization of their personal potential. We now enter section 2, Bat's original vision. To prescribe with high accuracy, we must drive away modern assumptions and look directly at how Dr. Edward Bach conceptualized this remedy in his original writings. Dr. Bach was a brilliant clinical observer who recognized that a lack of confidence was a core spiritual block that prevented the soul from fulfilling its earthly purpose. In this section, we will look at Bach's precise definitions, explore how he isolated the nature of confidence, and map out the crucial clinical boundary between fear, which belongs to other remedy categories, and pure self doubt. Ultimately, we will look at what Bach considered a fundamental human need, the foundational need to attempt. Let us read Dr. Bach's definitive text from The 12 Healers, which serves as our absolute diagnostic compass. He wrote, for those who do not consider themselves as good or capable as those around them. Let's pause on the phrase. This is the language of comparative inferiority. It is an immediate, automatic downgrading of oneself in relation to the social environment. He continues, they expect failure. Note the word expect. This is not a passing worry. It is an active expectation, a psychological blueprint. Finally, he writes, they do not make enough attempt to succeed. This is the clinical endpoint. The paralysis of execution. Bach cleanly isolates the issue. The problem is not a lack of success, it's a lack of an attempt. This quote reveals that Larch is specifically indicated when a patient surrenders before the battle has even begun. To simplify your clinical assessment, we can break the Larch archetype down into three pillars. Think of this as a diagnostic triad that must be present in your patient's intake presentation. Pillar 1 is inferiority. This is the constant painful belief that others possess more intelligence, beauty, skill, or worth. Pillar 2 is the expectation of failure. This manifests as an internal script that declares any venture a guaranteed disaster, rendering planning useless. Pillar 3 is the avoidance of opportunity. This is the behavioral expression of the first two pillars, where the patient actively declines promotions, avoids dating, or refuses to speak up. If you see inferiority and expected failure, but the person is still aggressively pushing forward, it's not a pure Larch state. The true Larch state requires all three pillars, culminating in absolute behavioral avoidance. This slide cuts directly to the core clinical paradox of Larch, the complete disconnection between objective reality and subjective perception. As clinicians, we must run a dual assessment on every patient. On the left side, we look at the objective reality. We find an individual who is highly skilled, intelligent, completely capable, and thoroughly prepared. They have the degrees, the experience, and the capacity. But when we look at the right side, their subjective perception, we see an entirely different reality. Their internal dialogue screams, not good enough, not ready, not qualified, likely to fail. They discount their achievements as luck and inflate their minor flaws into proof of total incompetence. Your job as a practitioner is to recognize that Large is not a remedy for skill development. It's a remedy to repair a distorted self assessment mechanism. We now enter section 3, where we examine the botanical signature of Larix decidua. In flower remedy therapy, the doctrine of signatures provides deep insight into a plant's therapeutic application. The way a plant grows, its relationship to the elements, and its seasonal cycles directly mirror the psychological dynamics it balances in humans. Larch is an extraordinary tree with a highly unique botanical profile. It is a conifer, yet it behaves like a deciduous tree. By studying its unique growth habits, its seasonal transformations, its vertical lines, and its environmental resilience in harsh alpine conditions, we can unlock a deeper understanding of how this remedy builds psychological stability in patients who feel fundamentally unstable. Let us look closely at the physical growth of the large tree. Larix decidua is known for its remarkable vertical growth pattern. It does not twist, creep, or hide in the undergrowth. It shoots straight up into the sky with absolute architectural integrity, frequently towering high above the surrounding forest canopy. The strong vertical presence represents a powerful botanical signature of confidence and aspiration. The tree shows no hesitation in claiming its natural right to light and space. For a patient stuck in a collapsed, self limiting, large state, someone who hunches their shoulders, speaks softly, and tries to remain invisible. This botanical energy introduces the structural frequency of uprightness, alignment, and the courage to be seen standing tall. The most unique botanical feature of the larch is that it is a deciduous conifer. Unlike standard evergreens that hold onto their needles years after year, the larch undergoes a complete seasonal shedding. In the autumn, its needles turn a vivid gold and then fall away completely, leaving the tree entirely bare and vulnerable throughout the harsh winter. This behavior is a profound psychological metaphor. It represents the capacity to release old growth cycles, to let go of outdated self concepts, past failures, and emotional patterns that no longer serve human potential. The larch does not hoard its needles out of fear of vulnerability. It trusts its core structure enough to strip down, rest, and prepare for renewal. This teaches the patient that true confidence includes the willingness to let go of defensive armoring and start fresh. Before the larch sheds its needles, it undergoes a magnificent color shift, turning into a brilliant display of golden autumn light. This transformation is highly significant because it occurs without any structural collapse. The tree does not wither away in a state of decay. It transitions with intense beauty and presence. This golden phase symbolizes maturity built through raw experience. It represents the natural evolution of identity, where an individual converts the challenges of life into wisdom. For the large patient, this botanical signature shows that the change and vulnerability do not lead to destruction. Instead, they represent an inner growth made visible, helping them step out of the gray shadows of self doubt and into the golden light of self expression. We must also consider where Larix decidua chooses to live. It thrives in alpine habitats, often growing on rocky, unforgiving mountain slopes exposed to severe winds, freezing temperatures, and heavy snow. It does not require a sheltered, protected valley to achieve its massive height. This habitat tells us that Larch possesses immense environmental resilience. It endures harsh winters, yet its wood remains highly flexible and strong, maintaining its structural integrity under pressure. This is a vital lesson for our patients. True confidence is not born in an environment free of challenges. Larch infuses the human personality with a quiet, alpine strength, enabling them to stand firm and adapt beautifully, even when facing harsh social criticism and professional pressure. A tree cannot grow exceptionally tall into the mountain wind without an extraordinary foundation underneath. The root architecture of the larch is deep, expansive, and highly secure, anchoring itself firmly into the bedrock. This structural reality provides the tree with deep stability beneath its rapid upward growth. This signature mirrors how healthy psychological confidence must be built upon a secure, grounded internal foundation. If a person tries to achieve success without deep roots, their confidence collapses at the first sign of criticism. The Larch remedy works directly on this underground architecture, helping the patient build internal stability and a grounded sense of self-worth first, so that their outward expression is fully supported by an unshakable foundation. Let us integrate these botanical observations into a clear clinical map. When we look at Larix decidua, we are looking at the literal embodiment of a confident tree. Every physical feature corresponds directly to a psychological theme in our patients. Its upright growth patterns address a lack of aspiration and low self esteem. Its deep root system stabilize chronic insecurity and fear of vulnerability. The seasonal shading of its needles resolves an obsession with past failures, breaking the habit of holding on to outdated limitations. Its survival on alpine mountain slopes balances a low tolerance for stress and an expectation of defeat. Finally, its towering height directly counters the psychological contraction of inferiority. By understanding this synthesis, you can see how the energy of this plant works to restructure a collapsed human ego. We now move into section 4, psychological and developmental expression. A large state does not drop out of the sky into an adult's life. It's a pattern that develops over time, often tracing its roots back to early childhood. To treat this condition effectively, we must understand how self doubt evolves across a lifespan. In this section, we will look at how the large matrix manifests during distinct developmental stages, from the hesitant child in the primary classroom through the highly self conscious adolescent comparing themselves to peers, to the young adult experiencing a delayed launch into professional life, and finally, to the adult stuck in a chronic pattern of underachievement. Understanding this timeline allows for early clinical intervention. In the pediatric practice or family counseling, the child requiring a large presents a very specific behavioral profile. This is the hesitant child. When you observe them in a group setting, they consistently stand in the background, watching other children participate with an intense quiet longing. They rarely volunteer to go first, and they actively avoid competitive games. This behavior is driven by an early fear of being judged and an automatic habit of comparing themselves unfavorably to siblings or classmates. They say things like, I can't draw as well as him, or she is smarter than me, so why try? This is the critical window where early inferiority formations take root. If left untreated, this early pattern hardens into a foundational belief system that dictates how they interact with challenges for the rest of their lives. As the child enters their formal school years, the large state manifests as underperforming potential. Teachers often write on their report cards, highly capable but needs to participate more. This student frequently knows the answer to a question, but they will never raise their hand. They sit quietly, paralyzed, by the conviction that their answer must be incorrect or that they will face public embarrassment. They actively avoid academic challenges, preferring to complete simple assignments well within their comfort zone rather than risk failure on a creative project. This dynamic shows that self doubt actively restricts intellectual and artistic achievement. The child's mind is fully functional, but their self doubt functions as an artificial ceiling, keeping their performance significantly lower than their actual cognitive capacity. When a large individual hits adolescence, the developmental pressure of identity formation amplifies their suffering. This stage is marked by intense, painful social comparison. The adolescent looks at peer groups and convinces themselves that they are fundamentally flawed, less attractive, less athletic, less witty, and less talented than those around them. This mindset leads to a severe reduction in self expression. They avoid sports tryouts, pass up school plays, and withdraw from social opportunities out of a profound fear of failing in public. They create a protective shell of non participation. They convince themselves that by not trying, they are keeping themselves safe from rejection. But the true consequence is a deep, quiet isolation and a growing resentment toward a world that seems to pass them by. In young adulthood, the Larch state manifests behaviorally as a delayed launch into life. This is a critical clinical presentation. These individuals graduate with excellent marks but completely freeze when it comes to career decisions. They stand at a crossroads looking at paths ahead but remain paralyzed by a fear of professional failure. They consistently avoid leadership roles, turn down advanced projects, and apply for positions far below their skill level. If an opportunity for advancement appears, they step back and say, I am not yet ready. This delayed ambition restricts their early life expansion, keeping them financially and professionally dependent long after they possess the objective maturity to step into the world as independent adults. If the large state remains untreated into mature adulthood, it hardens into a chronic pattern of underachievement. This is the 45-year-old employee who has sat at the exact same desk for 20 years, watching younger, less capable colleagues climb the corporate ladder. They do not lack talent, they lack risk taking capacity. This state is defined by chronic self limitation. They have completely habituated their avoidance, stopping any attempt to seek professional advancement or creative exposure. Their unique talents remain entirely dormant. They rationalize their position by claiming they prefer stability, but deep down, a persistent confidence deficit eats away at their self worth. Life becomes comfortably safe but unfulfilled. Let us summarize the developmental journey of the untreated large state. It operates as a continuous compounding trajectory of self restriction. In childhood, hesitation leads directly to adolescent comparison. The adolescent comparison creates the foundation for adult underachievement, resulting in a life defined by missed opportunities. However, the core clinical message of this timeline is optimism. Confidence can be restored at any point along this pathway. When Larch is introduced, whether to a 7-year-old child or a 60-year-old adult, it breaks this linear chain of avoidance. By initiating courageous participation, it unblocks experience, which rewrites the historical narrative and allows the individual to reclaim their life path. We now enter section 5, somatic markers and biological expression. As holistic clinicians, we know that the mind and body are not separate systems. Chronic emotional self doubt is not just a collection of thoughts, it's a psychological state that leaves clear physical signatures. When an individual spends years expecting failure and avoiding life, their nervous system, musculature, endocrine function, and behavioral posture adapt to that state of chronic contraction. In this section, we will explore the somatic cost of self doubt, analyzing how it manifests as acute performance anxiety, examination stress, chronic muscular tension patterns, and a profound secondary fatigue that arises from constant self limitation. Let us analyze the acute somatic presentation of Larch, performance anxiety and sympathetic nervous system reactivity. When a large individual is forced into a situation where they must perform under observation, their expectation of failure triggers an immediate, intense fight or flight response. This manifests as severe anticipatory nervousness days or even weeks before the event. On the day of the performance, the patient experiences heavy sympathetic activation, noticeable heart palpitations, visible trembling of the hands, a shaky voice, cold sweat, and inner restlessness. This physical reactivity confirms their mental belief that they are unfit for the task. Larch works beautifully here to calm this neurological overreactivity, lowering the physical stress response so the mind can function clearly. A specific clinical variation of this nervous system panic is classic examination stress. We see this constantly in students or professionals undergoing board exams. The underlying driver is a profound fear of inadequate performance. Under this intense evaluation pressure, the patient experiences an actual cognitive shutdown, a mental block during the exam. They know the material perfectly the night before, but the moment the test paper is placed in front of them, their confidence collapses, causing a total recall failure. This is almost always accompanied by gastrointestinal nervousness, nausea, cramps, or nervous diarrhea before the assessment. Larch acts as a stabilizer, preventing this cognitive emotional collapse and allowing the student to access their stored knowledge under pressure. When self-doubt is chronic, it shifts from acute nervous system panic into permanent muscular holding patterns. If you examine a classic large patient on the treatment table, you will see a physical reflection of psychological contraction. They internally shrink away from the world. The primary stress zones are concentrated in the shoulders, neck, upper back, and jaw. These individuals presents with chronically elevated tight shoulders, as if trying to shield themselves from view or pull their head into a protective shell. They carry immense neck tightness and engage in nocturnal jaw clenching. Their posture is defensive and collapsed. By resolving the psychological self-doubt, Larch helps release these deep neuromuscular patterns, allowing the body to stand open and relaxed. An overlooked somatic symptom of the large state is chronic fatigue. This is not a primary metabolic or mitochondrial deficit. It is an emotional energy drain that occurs secondary to self limitation. The process flow is clear. Persistent self doubt requires immense psychic energy to manage. When a person systematically avoids opportunities, they experience a deep internal frustration and a subsequent drop in positive motivation. This lack of forward momentum causes a profound loss of initiative, leading to mental exhaustion and physical lethargy. The patient complains of feeling constantly tired, but their fatigue is actually a result of life stagnation. Larch reignites their forward drive, and as they begin to participate in life, this heavy secondary fatigue completely lifts. Let us synthesize our somatic findings into a fast clinical checklist. When a patient presents in your office, look for this combination of physical and psychological indicators: acute performance anxiety, severe anticipatory stress before minor events, chronic muscular tension in the upper body, and a lack of creative and professional initiative. The ultimate diagnostic key is always the same. Their objective ability far exceeds their subjective self assessment. If you see a highly capable body and mind locked in a state of physical contraction and functional avoidance, your diagnostic focus should point directly to Larch. Revolving this state will unlock both their physical vitality and their psychological freedom. We now enter section 6, clinical case files from practice. Abstract theory is valuable, but true clinical mastery is forged by observing how a remedy works in real world scenarios. In this section, we will analyze 5 distinct, highly detailed case files. These cases span different age groups, professions, and gender expressions, demonstrating how the hidden confidence deficit disguises itself as other conditions, such as perfectionism, procrastination, or lack of ambition. We will trace the exact presentation of each patient and observe the step-by-step clinical transformation that occurs once Larch is introduced into their protocol. Our first case file concerns a 20 years old university student named ABC. ABC possessed a brilliant analytical mind, consistently ranking at the top of his class on written assignments. However, when his department head nominated him for a prestigious national scholarship competition that required an oral defense, he completely shut down. He came to my office intending to withdraw from the competition, stating flatly, "The other candidates are far more articulate. I have no chance of winning, and I will embarrass the department." This is classic Larch: high intelligence, low self confidence, and absolute avoidance of competitive evaluation. I prescribed Larch 4 drops 4 times a day. Within 3 weeks, his internal narrative shifted. He didn't become arrogant, but he found the steady courage to participate, deliver his defense, and ultimately secure the scholarship. Case file 2 focuses on a lady, 42 years old, senior graphic designer at a major marketing firm. Her portfolio was flawless, and she was the operational backbone of her creative team. Yet for 7 years, she watched junior designers apply for and win director level promotions above her. However, a leadership position opened. She refused to apply. Her intake statement was clear: "I am a good worker. but I am not executive material. If I apply and get rejected, I won't be able to face my team. This represents a chronic self underestimation and a deep fear of public failure. After 2 months on a tailored formula featuring Larch as the foundational remedy, she experienced a professional expansion. She applied for the next open regional director role, navigated the interview process with quiet composure, and was awarded the position. Case file 3 introduces us to a male 35 years old software engineer who dreamt of launching his own tech startup. He had written a brilliant, fully functional application, but he was trapped in a state of endless preparation. He had spent 3 years constantly editing his business plans, rewriting code, and conducting endless market research. When I asked him why hadn't launched, he admitted, if I launch now, the market will find flaws I haven't anticipated. It's not perfect yet. This is a vital clinical lesson. Perfectionism is often just a sophisticated defense mechanism driven by self doubt. He was using endless planning to delay action and protect himself from the risk of failure. Larch dissolved his paralysis, enabling him to stop planning, launch his application, and confidently adapt to real world user feedback. Let us review case file 4, which details a case of a girl, 29 years old, landscape painter. She had completed over 100 high quality canvases. However, instead of framing them, she stacked them facing the wall in her studio corner, refusing to show them to friends, let alone galleries. Her core belief was a painful statement of comparison. If I exhibit, real artists will laugh at my simple technique. This internal rejection occurred long before any public evaluation could take place. Somatically, she suffered from chronic fatigue and heavy, leaden feelings in her arms when she painted, a physical expression of her emotional suppression. Larch was introduced to unlock her creative expression. Over several weeks, the leaden feeling in her arms disappeared, and she found the courage to open her studio door, eventually booking her first successful solo gallery exhibition. Our final case involves a male patient of 50 years old, senior environmental scientist, and a leading expert in groundwater contamination. Despite his vast knowledge base and respected status, he suffered from severe public speaking paralysis. Whenever he was invited to present his research at international conferences, he either declined or passed the presentation to a junior colleague. His self assessment was completely skewed. I am a researcher, not a performer. If I get up on that stage, my mind will go blank and I will ruin the credibility of our entire lab. He was completely avoiding visibility out of an expectation of failure. Treatment with Larch focused on bridging the gap between his expertise and his confidence. Within a few months, he successfully delivered a keynote address to an audience of 500 peers with clear, unshakable composure. Let us analyze the core clinical lessons from these five diverse case histories. When we strip away the individual details, we see that a single pattern links them all together. First, ability was fully present in every single case. All were highly competent individuals. Confidence was the missing variable. Second, self-exclusion was their shared behavioral pattern. They did not get rejected by the world. They rejected themselves before the world even had a chance to evaluate them. Avoidance reinforced their feelings of inferiority. The most important lesson for us as practitioners is that participation is what initiated their transformation. Confidence did not drop out of the sky. The remedy provided the courage to act, and confidence grew through the resulting experience. We now enter section 7, differential diagnosis and matrix separation. In clinical practice, high accuracy prescribing requires master level differentiation. Ma- Many remedies present with surface similarities, such as avoidance, hesitation, or withdrawal, but their underlying root mechanisms are completely different. If you prescribe Larch to a patient whose avoidance is driven by a fear of danger or a fear of responsibility, the remedy will fail. To ensure precision, we must isolate Larch from 5 closely related remedies: Mimulus, gentian, elm, pine, and cerato. We will also examine its integration with the classic homeopathic constitutional remedy, Silesia. Let us differentiate Larch from Mimulus. Both remedies feature a presentation of avoidance, but their root causes are entirely distinct. Larch is entirely confidence-based. The Larch patient avoids a task because they doubt their ability and expect personal failure. Their internal script is, I cannot do it because I am not capable. Mimulus, on the other hand, is fear-based. The mimulus patient avoids a situation because they have a specific fear of a known worldly danger or an unpleasant outcome, such as fear of public speaking, fear of dogs, or fear of illness. In mimulus, their self-confidence and ability are often completely intact. They simply perceive the environment as unsafe. Their script is, I am afraid to do it because it might hurt. Always look for whether the core block is self-doubt or specific fear. The differentiation or distinction between large and gentian is a matter of timeline. We must evaluate whether the discouragement occurs before or after an attempt has been made. Large is a pre-attemptive state. The individual is discouraged before they even begin. They expect failure, hesitate to take the first step, and suffer from a fundamental deficit of foundational confidence. Gentian, conversely, is a post-reactive state. The Gentian individual actually begins the task with a reasonable amount of faith. However, when they encounter an unexpected obstacle, setback, or delay, they tumble into a deep discouragement and lose faith. Gentian is a disappointment response to known external blocks, whereas large is an internal self sabotage that prevents the journey from even starting. Let us compare large and elm using a workplace scenario. Both individuals may present with a sudden hesitation to complete a project, but their baseline psychology is completely different. Larch is chronic and inferiority based. The individual has long standing self doubt, systematically underestimates their capacity, and avoids challenges because they feel fundamentally incapable. Elm is temporary and responsibility based. The Elm individual is typically a highly confident, capable leader who willingly takes on immense workloads. However, a moment comes where the sheer volume of responsibility exceeds human capacity and they experience a sudden acute overwhelm. They freeze and feel incapable, but it's a temporary state of exhausted capacity, not a permanent conviction of personal inferiority. The boundary between larch and pine is a profound diagnostic shift from self doubt to deep guilt. Larch is focused on capability and adequacy. The patient feels inadequate, questions their talent, and lives in an inferiority state. Their comparison script is others are better, more capable, and more successful than me. Pine, however, operates in the moral and existential realm of worthiness. The pine patient does not necessarily doubt their ability, they doubt their right to be happy or successful. They live in a state of chronic guilt and self approach, apologizing for their existence and taking blame for things outside their control. Their internal script is everything is my fault. I am fundamentally unworthy of success. Larch says, ask, am I capable? Pine asks, am I clean? Our final botanical comparison separates Larch from Cerato, along with decision-making pathway. Both remedies display hesitation, but the underlying deficiency is entirely different. Larch is a deficiency of confidence in action. The patient doubts their ability to execute a task, hesitates to act, and asks, can I do it? They step back and remain passive. Cerato is a deficiency of trust in one's own judgment. The Cerato individual has no problem taking action, but they trust their inner voice. But they do not trust their inner voice to make the right choice. Consequently, they seek advice repeatedly from authority figures, friends, and strangers, completely overriding their own intuition. Their script is, am I right? What do you think I should do? Larch needs the courage to execute. Cerato needs the courage to trust their own mind. For those practicing integrated holistic medicine, the energetic connection between the Bach remedy Larch and the homeopathic constitutional remedy Silesia is profound. They form what I call a shared therapeutic axis. Both archetypes present with deep timidity and intense sensitivity to peer evaluation and a fundamental lack of self-assertion. The Silesia patient presents with a delicate constitution and a deep fear of failure, particularly a fear of appearing inadequate or failing under observation. They often over-prepare to protect their fragile ego. When you find a patient who fits the constitutional profile of Silesia, adding Larch to their flower remedy bottle creates an incredible synergy. It reinforces their internal strength and builds unshakable stability from the inside out. Let us review several advanced prescribing pearls to elevate your clinical accuracy. First, train your ear to listen for the language of expected failure during your case intake. Pay attention when a patient makes self-doubt as rational stability or a presence for an uncomplicated life. Preference of an uncomplicated life. Second, systematically cross-reference their objective achievements against their self-assessment. If you see a major gap there, think of Larch immediately. Third, watch for subtle self-exclusion patterns like missing a deadline for an application by accident. Finally, remember this vital clinical progression. Confidence often improves before achievement does. The remedy works by changing how the patient feels before they step onto the stage. allowing them to participate and build real-world success. Let's look at three professional clinical formulations featuring Larch designed for specific real-world challenges. Formula 1 is the performance builder, Larch, gentian and elm. This combination is specifically engineered for professional or academic growth where a patient faces a massive challenge and needs to balance expected failure, setback discouragement, and situational overwhelm. Formula 2 is a student confidence formula, Larch, Serato, and white chestnut. This is your primary protocol for examination anxiety, balancing self-doubt, a lack of trust in one's answers, and the circular, looping thoughts that cause mental blocks. And Formula 3 is the leadership expansion formula, Larch, walnut, and hornbeam. This is ideal for promotions, business launches, or major life transitions, helping the patient overcome self-doubt, adapt to, adapt to a new role, and find the structural energy to take action. As we approach the conclusion of this masterclass, let us elevate our prescriptive perspective to look at the spiritual evolution of the Larch archetype. At its highest energetic level, Larch facilitates a beautiful journey from self-doubt to complete self-realization. It helps the soul trust its innate unique gifts. When the Larch energy is fully integrated, the habit of social comparison completely dissolves. The individual understands that someone else's success does not mean they have failed. They realize that every soul has a unique frequency and a distinct purpose on this earth. They begin to participate fully and authentically in life, realizing that true confidence is not about being flawless. It's about a deep self acceptance that frees them to fulfill their individual purpose without fear. In conclusion, let us reinforce the foundational principles of today's masterclass. Always remember, ability exists before confidence. Your patients do not need more training, they need to repair their self assessment mechanism. Remember that expected failure is a restrictive script that shrinks human potential, and that courageous participation is the only path that creates lasting confidence. Mastering the differential diagnosis between Larch, Mimulus, Gentian, and Serato will immediately enhance your clinical accuracy. I challenge each of you to take these insights back to your practices, watch for hidden Larch states, and help your patients step out of the shadows. Thank you for your presence today, and let us continue to explore together. Thank you.